print statements are pretty basic, and you aren't able to insert print statements in the middle of, let's say, playtesting your game. You have to stop playtesting, edit your code, and then go back and playtest the game again and try to find the area that the bug was occurring in your game. An example here that I have is just some basic code where I have two print statements that just notify me that a particular function has successfully executed. So if I go and run my code, what you're going to see is that function 2 first executed and then function 1 executed, which is what I would expect given how this code is designed. Now, if you want more control and extra features over your debugging process, then this is where you're going to have to use breakpoints. A breakpoint is simply a little area that you can mark in your code that you would like the game to pause, or a particular script to pause its execution when it hits that breakpoint, and then you can walk through the process of executing the code after the breakpoint step by step. Breakpoints also allow you to see what values are in every single variable in a particular scope. You can use them to see the order of how your code executes and a bunch more features. So to add a breakpoint into our code, all we need to do is go to the left-hand side of our script where all of the numbers appear for each line of code, and you could see this little transparent red dot that is notifying us that we can add a breakpoint on any one of these lines. So I'm going to add a breakpoint on the calling of function 2. Here I have my brand new breakpoint, and when I go and run my game, currently this breakpoint is active, so it's going to pause execution and it's going to throw me back into this script to start walking through the execution of this script. So if I hit run here, as you can see, it hopped me back into my script, and now there is a yellow arrow here indicating that we have stopped right at this function call, and now we have to start using the debugger to start stepping into, stepping over, or stepping out of code. Now, breakpoints have a ton of settings. So if you right click your breakpoint, you can see this little menu pop up where you can disable, delete, or edit the breakpoint. If you edit the breakpoint, you're going to see some settings appear that give you some extra features with your breakpoint. For example, this breakpoint will only execute or stop your code when a certain condition is met. You can have your breakpoints spit out a message when they're reached. You can have your breakpoints continue executing without halting a particular script like we are right now. So that means you could use a breakpoint as some kind of print statement where you can have it print out a value but continue executing and not pausing your game. So as an example, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to edit my breakpoint and I'm going to spit out a log message. Now, the format of the text that needs to go in here is going to be the exact same as a print statement, so we need to put quotations around any text we want to enter into the console. So I'm just going to say that this breakpoint was reached, and then I'm going to enable continue execution. I'm going to save that. As you can see, the shape of my breakpoint has changed, and now it has become a log expression. So if I go and run my game, it's going to bypass that breakpoint, but it is going to print and say that the breakpoint was reached. But of course, it didn't pause or halt the execution inside of my script. Now, we can also add a condition to our breakpoint, meaning this breakpoint will only trigger when some kind of condition is met. So for example, maybe I only want this particular breakpoint to trigger when, let's say, key number 1 inside of my table is equal to a value of 20. So what I can do here is I can simply type out the name of my table and refer to key 1, and this has to be equal to 20. So this is going to be a Boolean expression right here that's going to evaluate whether or not we should encounter this breakpoint. So I'm going to save that, and if I run the game, what you're going to notice is that, well, it didn't log anything, it didn't print anything because that condition was not met, it wasn't true. But if I go ahead and swap key 1 to 20, and then I were to run my game, as you can see, the breakpoint was reached because that condition evaluated to true. We also have the option to remove the breakpoint once it has been triggered, and then we can also define some custom contexts for our breakpoints. So maybe if you had a module script and you only wanted to execute code in it, particularly for the client or maybe only for the server, this other context here of edit is specifically for debugging plugins, which you're not going to have to worry about. But I'm just going to leave this at the default of all contexts. And then I'm going to disable continue execution, because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert another breakpoint just randomly up there, because I want to show you another cool thing with breakpoints, and that's the ability to add or edit breakpoints while you're in the middle of debugging. So if we go and run the game, we're going to first hit this breakpoint and we're going to end up at the basically reading of this function. So if we step into that, there we go, we created that function, and then eventually we're going to hit this breakpoint down here. Now the cool thing is that I can edit this breakpoint while I'm in the middle of debugging. So if I don't want this to say this particular message, or if I don't want to check this particular condition here, I can just get rid of that. And then I could print something else saying like, I don't know, I'll just say hello, and then I'll save that. And now when I continue stepping through my code, what you're going to see is it prints hello. I was able to edit the breakpoint in real time. Good luck trying to do that with print statements when you're in the middle of executing your code. Now, sometimes you might not want to have a breakpoint execute immediately. In that case, this is when you would go and you would hit your breakpoint again, which would make it hollow, indicating that this breakpoint is currently disabled. It's not active. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to disable both of those breakpoints. And then I'm going to just create a while true do loop. And I'm just going to constantly execute my function. Actually, let me get rid of that breakpoint and let me just slap a new one there. And I'm just going to constantly execute function 2, and I'm going to yield every, let's say, 2 seconds. Now, sometimes we may not want to execute a particular breakpoint immediately. Sometimes we might want to wait until we know we're going to get to the area where the bug is going to occur or whatever. So that's where we can go to the View tab, and we can open up the breakpoint window, which is right here. And this is going to pop up this particular window. Let me just slap it down here. And it's going to show you all of the breakpoints that are currently in all of the scripts in your game. It'll show you whether or not that breakpoint's enabled or not. And you can simply click on it if you want to enable that breakpoint or disable it. You can enable all breakpoints or disable all from this button. Code is executing, right? We're not encountering that breakpoint. But let's say I want to go ahead and enable the breakpoints. I'm going to tick that to true. And there we go. We now have hopped into the debugging process because that breakpoint was triggered once we enabled it. I'd also like to explain these 3 buttons a little bit more. Step into basically means you're going to be stepping into a particular scope. So if you don't want to bother with stepping into the scope of something, maybe it's the scope of a function or an if statement or whatever, then you can use the step over function instead. So for example here, if I don't want to go into function 2, I just want it to do all of its execution and skip having to continually stepping into different stuff, then I can just hit step over. And as you can see, function 2 executed fine, and then now I'm at my yield statement. And then I can continue stepping to the next iteration of this loop. So I step into, I yielded, there we go. Now we're checking the condition of the while loop. We're going to step into that. Then we're back into our function. If this time I decide, you know what, I want to step into function 2, then I can hit step into. And now we have made it into function number 2. We're going to assign a value to our variable b. We're going to print to the console. And now I have another opportunity to step into another function. So let's go ahead and step into that. Now I'm going to be assigning the value 2 to a, and then I'm going to print function 1 executed. We're going to continue stepping into, and then we're going to hit all of the end statements once we return out of all those functions. And then boom, now we're back to task.wait. Once we step into that, it's going to yield for 2 seconds. There we go. Now we're back at the beginning of the while loop. Now let me go ahead and demonstrate the step out function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to step into function 2. But let's say I don't want to be in here any longer. So you know what? I'm just going to hit step out. And it did all of its functionality, executed everything, and then it came back to where function 2 is called. And now to yield for 2 seconds. There we go. Now we're back at the beginning of the while loop. Now let me go ahead and demonstrate the step out function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to step into function 2. But let's say I don't want to be in here any longer. So you know what? I'm just going to hit step out. And it did all of its functionality, executed everything, and then it came back to where function 2 is called. And now I'm back at the yield statement. So that's how you can use these 3 buttons to either step into a scope, step over a scope, or step out of a scope. Now the next debugging tool I would like to show you is another menu, and you can find it in the View tab, and it's called Watch. So let's go ahead and open up that menu. And this is a very neat and useful menu that allows you to see all of the variables in the current script that's being debugged. In this case, that's my script right here with all these different variables in it. And you can look at all of the different variables. For example, I can see A, I can see B, I can see my functions, and I can see my table, and I'm able to see all of the different values that are being currently stored in all these different variables. I'm also able to hit this button right here and change the scope. So if I only want to see local variables, I can just disable up value, and I can see all of the local variables currently. Or if I don't want to see anything, I'm not going to see anything at all. Or if I only want to see global variables, I can tick that, and then there's the global variables that are in this script. But the main use of this watch menu is the ability for you to just take a peek at all the different values inside of your variables to just make sure that everything is executing and storing information how you'd expect. That way you can check to see if there's any variables that might be nil when you don't want it to be nil, or storing a wrong value when it should be storing a different value. This is very useful for that. Another useful thing with the watch menu is that you can watch different expressions. So for example, I'm going to type an expression here. I'm going to do A plus B. And what you're going to see is A plus B is 4. How the heck did it know that? Well, A and B in this current script is 2, and B is also 2, so A plus B is 4. And then I can execute and go through my script, and if A and B's values ever change, this is also going to update, because that's what this arithmetic expression is doing. It's just adding those two variables together. And we're not limited to only arithmetic expressions. You could put Boolean expressions in here too. You can put whatever expression you'd want. And as you saw earlier, I added this expression in real time while I was in the middle of debugging, which is even better. But let me tell you, the benefits of breakpoints don't stop there. There's another window we can open in the View tab, and that is the call stack. And what this is going to display, what it says, view the current call stack, it's going to show us basically the order of stuff being executed in our code and what functions are being executed. So this one also provides those step in or step over or step out functions. So we can just click those, and I'm just going to start stepping into stuff. So I'm going to step into function 2. So now it knows we stepped into function 2. And we're currently at line 10. We stepped into it from line 18, which is right here. And then we can step in again. We're moving along. We're currently at line 13 inside of function 2. And then we step into function 1. We can step into that. And now it tells us that we stepped into function 1 at line 14 inside of function 2. And now we're currently at line 7 in function 1. So this call stack is really, really useful when you need to verify the logic or how things are being executed in a particular order. Because let's say you had some functions executing, but they weren't executing in the right order. Well, how would you know? Well, the easiest way to know would be to just check the call stack. Step through your code, go through it one by one, and just take a look at the call stack. Pretty easy. So breakpoints, the watch menu, and the call stack are going to be the three main tools that you will utilize during your debugging process to make debugging as easy and efficient as possible. Now, there is one more tool that I would like to show you that doesn't have to do with breakpoints, but it's basically, you can kind of think of it as like a prevention tool so that errors don't happen in the first place, and that's going to be the script analysis window. So let's go ahead and open up that real quick, and I'm just going to close out of the other debugging windows. And what the script analysis window does is it basically spits out all of the errors or warnings that was caught by the linter. So for example, what I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to clean up all these breakpoints, delete all that, and I'm just going to delete all this code. Let's say I had a function, and I'm just going to call this function ABC. Let's say it takes some kind of parameter, and let's say that parameter has to be a number. Well, let's say I was a little silly, and I accidentally passed a string here instead of a number. like I was have your breakpoints continue executing without halting text that needs to go right. It's going to bypass that breakpoint. As new execution, I'm going to save that. As you can see, the shape of my breakpoint has changed, and now it has become a log expression. So if I go and run my game, it's going to bypass that breakpoint, but it is going to print and say that the breakpoint was reached. But
Alright guys, welcome back to me sometimes. Well, I mean, more when I was a beginner, honestly. Sometimes I actually... Okay.
Using print statements is the most primitive way of debugging, right? No offense, but I assume, because you're watching the video and everything, you're likely, more of a beginner to this, and you probably just use print statements whenever you want to test if a script works, right? Like, okay, if this is true, then, print this, but if this is false, then, print that, because, you need to know if everything works. That works until you start actually having more complex scripts, or just more scripts in general, right? Now, even if you don't have that, right? If you're just a beginner, you're like, oh, what is this guy talking about? Blah, 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 whatever. This is still going to be insanely valuable for you because debugging scripts, right? Knowing how to fix errors is the number one thing that's going to actually keep you motivated to learn. Because if you just see an error and you don't know how to fix it, it takes you a while, well, then you just won't care, right? Like, you'll just quit, right? You'll just get annoyed. So this is where I discuss breakpoints. So let me show you, right? I'll just make a script inside server script service, just a regular server script, right? And then what I'll do is I will make it, I'll make a variable first of all. So I'll make a test variable, right? And I'll make it equal to 100, okay? Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if test variable is equal to 100, then we're going to print yes, right? But then if it's not, then we print no, right? And then we could just print something like check completed, right? So we have a variable, we test variable is equal to 100, then we're going to print yes, right? But then if it's not, then we print no, right? And then we could just print something like check completed, right? So we have a variable, we check if it's 100 or not, and then we print check completed, right? So something like this is how most people debug their code, right? So let's say you want to check if test var is at, so like you make it equal to 100, then like, let's say there's a bunch, let's just imagine there's like lots of code here, right? And then somewhere in this code, the test variable value may change. It might be 101, might be 90, might be -10, who knows, right? And then if I play the game right now, right, then as you can see, there we go. So it says yes, so test variable is equal to 100, and it says check completed. I have no clue what this means, infinite yield on core GUI, Roblox GUI, wait for child modules. That's that's something on Roblox's end. I think, again, don't worry about this. But the point is, we just successfully technically debugged code, yippee, right? So this is where I'll actually show you how to use a breakpoint. The idea of a breakpoint is that you place it on a line of code, right? And then as the script begins running, when it enters that breakpoint, by default, it stops the code. So let me show you what I mean, right? We have this test variable here. So we make it equal to 100. But then what if what I wanted to do is I wanted to make a variable, and then for some reason, like just for testing purposes, I didn't want this code to run. What I can do is, after I set the variable, I didn't want this code to run. What I can do is, after I set the variable to 100, I'll just go over here, right? So like, as you can see, there's like a red circle that pops up, and I'll just click, right? This is a break point. Now, if I play the game, you'll notice that it goes into debugging mode, right? So yeah, the rendering is paused for debugging. So as you can see, nothing's being printed, right? So it's stopped over here, right? So right now it's over here. So like the test variable should be equal to 100, everything's nice, but it's not printing this. Now, this is like basically what a breakpoint is. The next thing I want to talk to you about is you see this like arrow thing, right? This is the next line that it's gonna like actually run, right? So like this line is print, right? So it's just waiting to see if it's allowed to print this line or not. And the way we tell it what it can or cannot do are these things over here, right? So there should be a tab here called script, which should automatically open for you. It's where you see the server, resume, stop. You have step into, step over, and step out. So what step out does is it just automatically just like just runs all the code, right? And then I'll have to stop the game and then play it again. That's like the one annoying thing about debugging. Step into simply runs the next line of code, right? And like it only runs a line of code which actually does something. So like an if statement doesn't really do anything. So it just skips right past the print because print actually does something. It doesn't, go to else because, I mean, what is else doing? Else isn't really doing much, right? So it then it's going to, from yes, it's going to skip to no. Then it's going to skip to adjustment of code game and then play it again. That's like the one annoying thing about debugging. Step into simply runs the next line of code, right? And like it only runs a line of code which actually does something. So like an if statement doesn't really do anything. So it just skips right past the print because print actually does something. It doesn't, go to else because, I mean, what is else doing? Else isn't really doing much, right? So it then it's going to, from yes, it's going to skip to no. Then it's going to skip to print check completed. And the way we skip, and then we just say step into. So we click this. So then it runs that, and then it prints yes, right? So it runs, our if statement. And now it's ready to print check completed. So then we can say step into, and then it finishes that line, and then it says check completed. And now our code is basically done, right? Finishes that line, it's ready to print check completed. So then we can say step into, and then it finishes that line, and then it says check completed. And now our code is, and now it's ready to print check completed. So we click this. So then it runs that, and then it prints yes, right? So it runs, our if statement, and now it's ready to print check completed. So then we can say step into, and then it finishes that line, and then it says check completed. And now our code is basically done, right? So yeah, so step into is how you kind of continue line by line from a breakpoint. Now step over only matters when we're dealing with functions. So let me show you what I mean. If over here I create a function, right? Local function, and I'll call it check value, right? And then this check value will take the, I don't know, just the, it's gonna take what? It's gonna take a yes or no parameter, right? So we'll just say yes or no, right? So we have a function called check value, which is gonna take something, which here is referred to as yes or no, and then we're just gonna say if, or no, we're just gonna print yes or no, right? Print yes or no, like so. So we're gonna make a function where we just give it a value and it just prints that value, right? So here what we can do is instead of printing yes, we can call the function, so check value yes, or no, check value yes, so because it's gonna print out yes, and then here we could, check value no. Now the reason I'm doing it like this is just to show you what step over does as opposed to step into. In a real game, never do this. Just use a print statement. It's not worth it to make functions. Or like yes or no, like so. So we're gonna make a function where we just give it a value and it just prints that value, right? So here what we can do is instead of printing yes, we can call the function, so check value yes, or no, check value yes, so because it's gonna print out yes, and then here we could, check value no. Now the reason I'm doing it like this is just to show you what step over does as opposed to step into. In a real game, never do this. Just use a print statement. It's not worth it to make functions. Or like functions as simple as these, right? So if I play the game right now, so what step into does, right? So we have a breakpoint over here. Is if I step into the check value script, I mean the check value function, right? So it's gonna run the function, and what step into does is it's gonna go inside of the function. Like that, see? So when it runs the function, then it goes inside the function. Like so. And then, okay, that's done, that's done. Okay, so now it prints it out, right? Then it goes into here. So the step into actually goes like inside of functions. However, what step over does is like it still runs the function, right? So it's still gonna print out yes or no, but it doesn't go inside of it. So it just runs the function. But it doesn't go inside like so. So step over, yeah. See, so it doesn't bother going inside the function. So it just runs the function. But it's like yeah, prints out yes, check completed. So it's the same thing, but it steps over the function, right? So I'm gonna delete this because this is insanely stupid. Please don't do this in a real game. Let's see, print yes, print no. The other thing I want to talk to about breakpoints, right? Which is I think the main part. So you can actually disable breakpoints like this. You can click to toggle like whether they're enabled or disabled. To delete a breakpoint, you just right click and click delete. You can right click and click disable breakpoints. However, the main thing about breakpoints is that you can edit a breakpoint. So I know it's a lot, but don't worry, we'll get through this. The way a breakpoint actually like runs all of these like checks, right, is it goes from top to bottom. So first it does the condition, then the log message, then whether continue execution is true, then whether to remove breakpoint on hit, then it actually sees whether it should trigger at something. I know I'm like this isn't making any sense right now. I need you to have this in mind that like it goes from top to bottom, right? And for this case, I'm going to delete the if statement. Like so. So we just have a test variable, and then we just have a print that says check completed. So the only thing, oh, I deleted it by accident. So the only thing that's stopping this print statement from actually occurring is this breakpoint. So I'm going to edit it. So the very first thing that we're able to change is the condition. And if you put nothing in there, then the breakpoint will like stop. It's going to stop the script. It's not going to run this this print statement. However, if we put a condition here, so for example, like if something is equal to 42, so if we put a condition here which is true, then the breakpoint will not activate, and so it's gonna just let the code continue running. So for example, we could say test var, which is the name of our variable, equal to 100. So if this is true, right, then the breakpoint will not activate, and it's gonna print check completed, right? So if I'm gonna save this, and as you can see, it has this like nice little symbol on it now, and then I play. Yeah, so as you can see, the breakpoint works, right? So because the condition is true, the breakpoint is actually working. It's halting the code. Now, if the breakpoint was false, so if test variable, if we're like, oh, what if it's equal to 102, right? Which it isn't, it's 100. So then this would be equal to false. So if the condition is equal to false, then the breakpoint does nothing. Yeah, then the game just runs, the script just runs, check completed runs, just like that, right? So the breakpoint will only not run if the, well, in terms of conditions, right? So like, if all you're doing is the condition, then the breakpoint will not run if this is equal to false. However, if this is either equal to true, or you just leave this blank, right, then it's gonna halt the code. So for the sake of this, we can just test var equal. Yeah, sure. Let's just keep it at this, right? Then the next thing is the log message, and what the log message does is if this is equal to true, then we're gonna print something out. I think, yeah. So for example, and by the way, this has to be a string, right? Because what it does is it takes this log message and it puts it inside a print statement, right? So like anything you put here, write it the same as you would inside like the print brackets. So like if you want to add text, don't just write text like this. You actually have to put them inside of quotation marks, right? And you can add variables by doing the 2 dots and then variable, or you can do a comma and then add the variable, right? So for example, what I could do is I could say like log message is going to be error, I'll add a colon, and then we're going to write the variable value along with the error. So if I save this right now, and if I hit play, as you can see, it prints out error, and then it prints out the test variable value, which is 100, right? And the reason it's printing it out, I disabled it by accident, and it's called a log point. Like whenever you have a log thing, it changes icons, and it's called the log point now. But like, don't bother with that. It's still a breakpoint. I'll like, just so you don't get confused, it's still a breakpoint, right? So yeah, this log message will only run if the breakpoint actually stops, right? So if this condition is either true or has nothing in it, then the log message will run. So here we're printing out error, and then I'm adding this variable to it, right? So yeah, we have that. And again, this only runs if, like I said, so if this is, if we do something like this, right, where the condition is going to be false, then the log message will not run because the breakpoint will not like continue running, right? So if if the condition is false, it just runs the code and it doesn't send us any logs. So if let's see, yeah, then we have options. So continue execution is pretty simple, right? If this is on, then like it checks for the condition, right? And like, okay, if the condition is true, right? So if test variable is equal to 100, then it's still gonna print out the log message, if we have one, but then it's not gonna halt the code. So it's gonna continue going. So if I save the game right now, so test variable is at 100, so it still gives us the log with error 100, but it doesn't halt the script anymore. Like it still runs the script, right? So this is nice for like if you don't want to like actually affect the script, you just want to get like just a print message, right? this is where it basically becomes an if statement, right? Like you could make an if statement that does the same thing basically. But this is just more compact, I would say, right? Just more simple. Um, and then there's a thing called remove breakpoint on hit. So when the breakpoint is actually, like hit, when the condition is true. Um, I'm not too sure if this removes it just like whenever you go on the breakpoint, or only if this condition is actually like true or empty, right? Um, but effectively, what this will do is, let's say we have like a loop, right? And then we have a breakpoint like in the beginning of the loop, and then we go on the breakpoint, it does its thing, and then we keep going through the loop, and then we go back to on the top of the loop. If remove breakpoint on hit was true, then the first time we go through this breakpoint, like the first loop, it just gets deleted, right? So then like the second time we loop, it doesn't see this breakpoint. But then if this is false, if we don't remove the breakpoint, then every single loop, this breakpoint is gonna continue activating, right? Um, so yeah, so like just whenever you go through this breakpoint, it just removes itself. So that's what this means, which I don't have a point to set this to true because we don't have any loops, so I'll just keep this at false. And the last thing about breakpoints is this thing called trigger at. By default, it's at all context, but then you could set it to custom context, which is going to give you client, server, and edit. So client means like, will this breakpoint activate when it's running on a server?
If you haven't seen it already, there's this game on Roblox floating around on the recommended page called Scriptbox, and according to the description, Scriptbox is a place to find scripts to use for your game. The scripts are free to use in any Roblox game with no credit required. These scripts are not to be used for commissions or any other kind of paid work. All scripts in the game are written by Purple Lua and contributors. So when I first saw this, I decided to hop into the game to see the quality of the example scripts. And I must say, there are a lot of things that can be improved. So I thought this would be a great learning opportunity for new scripters to see. Let's go ahead and pick a landmine, right? Let's take